getting quick. Yeah.
Both lights?
Yeah. It shows it's recording.
Fake.
Yeah. Sorry?
Oh, wait a minute, 1 second. Oh, sorry.
The people are from all the areas, right? From Kosovo or Serbia, Albania, where there's other Serbian areas too.
Yes, David is trying to figure it out. They're Albanian Americans born in Ohio, parents born in Albania.
Now Ben's doing good work.
Brendan Ellis, RMC.
Right.
He's a veteran service officer.
I got one of those. You didn't get those in the Air Force.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm Air Force, Senator.
The orange juice.
That's right.
Phil Alfred's our citizen chairman, and his son, Phil.
Hi, Phil. Good to see you.
And this is our,
Ann
is the head of our Realtors Association.
Oh, great.
And they're coming here tonight. Scott Vanderhoff is a candidate for executive assistant to Rockland County. And Bill Huckman, former Republican chair.
Hey, Bill. Long time ago, right? Yeah.
I need to wrestle on Noble Media. Good to meet you.
I'm going to with you in a second.
These are more of our...
Yeah, why do we know each other?
Yeah.
Right. How you doing? Good. Some of your friends here too, right?
Yep.
Bob, Bill, how are you? You all going to stay for dinner? Oh, good.
They're all Joe's guests.
All right. Oh, you're
Excuse me.
Where's Joe?
Yes.
He's late.
Joey's late. You've been an hour on time. That's how we get elected. Yes. Good to see you. Thank you. So yeah, we got here. You got here a little bit early, didn't we?
Yes. Well, we welcome you getting here.
Where do you live now? You all live in this area?
Yes, I live up here.
Right. They're all in. Yeah.
And they're super supportive.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
They're all very much concerned.
He's a good congressman.
Yeah, I know
I love him.
Yeah.
Up here in Orange County.
That's good. He does. He
Joe
does a
is
good.
going to be taking part in our program.
He does a good job. Yeah.
All right. Can we take
Don't let
inside
him filibuster.
Right.
Yeah. Bob, Bill, how are you? You know Congressman Gilman?
Can we borrow you for
Yeah, we'll go down there and do a
this?
little
Right,
quick
okay.
media. We're going to do it down here.
Yes, we have a room. Senator Jones, Georgia Tiggins,
Nice to meet you.
and her daughter, Nicole,
Hi, Nicole, how are you? Nice to see you.
son-in-law, Nicholas.
Hi, nice to meet you, sir.
Married.
Oh, wow, congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Newlyweds.
Good.
He is not here yet.
I know Ralph, yeah. He gave me a ride once.
I remember that ride?
Yeah, I think so. That when I was with him, too.
Yes, the both of us.
Yeah.
But we made it, and I want to thank you very much for that,
Yeah,
too.
right.
That was great.
Yeah, I'm glad we made it, yeah. Hi. Oh, no, how are you?
Linda Delaney. Carmel Wilson, to our good understanding.
Good. Hi. How are you, sir? Good, how you doing? Good. Hi.
Andy Zredsky's our press officer. Good to see you.
Hi.
Come on in, folks. If you want to close the door behind you, we got to lose place.
Where do you want us, over here?
Wherever you would like.
Here. We can either stand. Is it better standing? Oh, here's better, right? Yeah, let's stand.
Now, Senator, let me alert you, you're in the land of pineapples, good onions, and outstanding
Well, I heard about the
journalists.
onions. Yeah, I know about the pineapples. Yeah.
These are the final journalists in the Hudson, but let me remind you, folks, the Senator is pressed for time, so.
I give short answers.
Sir, can you give us your feelings on the health care?
Rather mixed. I mean, I want to, as I said to President Clinton, I want to start down the road together. I think it's very important we address this big issue. But like everybody else, how are we going to pay for it? And it's going to be too much government, and you're still going to have your choice of doctors and things of that kind. So we got a lot of big questions. It'll probably be, I would guess, a year before we vote. I don't know what you estimate. So if the hard part's coming, it's like, I've compared it to a flood. When you got the water coming up and people are putting up sandbags and the TV and the press are there, then the water goes down and somebody has to take the sandbags away. So after Mrs. Clinton finishes, the water's going down, then the nitty-gritty starts. There'll probably be dozens and dozens of hearings in all kinds of committees, and we're not even close to getting any agreement.
So everybody wants about 96. Any word on that? Any thoughts?
Well, I've thought about 96. I hope I'm still around. So, yeah. But no, not really. It's it's very early yet. I think 94. In fact, 93. We've got a gubernatorial race in New Jersey and one in Virginia. We've got the mayor's race in New York City. So we've got some big ones coming up. So far, we've been very successful. We've won the 4 big elections since Clinton was elected, with 2 Senate races, mayor of L.A. and the lieutenant governor in Arkansas. And I called a young lady yesterday named Ann Bush, who for the first time in history run a legislative seat in Arkansas in her district, in her particular area. So it's kind of, have a Bush win in Clinton's hometown. Anyway.
Senator, do you think that the Clinton administration has made a bona fide effort to bring Republicans at least into the deliberative process on the health care issue?
I think so.
I know you said that you didn't want them to just pick off 1 or 2, but you wanted a broad-based effort.
Well, my view is you're going to have health care, a program that people are going to respond to. It's got to be more than just passing by 51 to 49 in the Senate and squeaking through the House. I mean, the American people are going to have more confidence if we do it together and do it right. That's why we don't need any deadlines, no timetables. We got a lot of big problems we haven't addressed, particularly, let's take my little state of Kansas. 89% of our employers have 20 employees or less. Now, we're a small business state, and we can't put them out of business with mandates and things of that kind. I assume you've got a lot of small business people, too,
yes, indeed.
Businessmen and women. So, my view is let's start off in a positive way. Some of my colleagues are already going after the plan. Well, I raise questions about it, which I think we should do, but I want to try to be helpful. If we have I told Mrs. Clinton we might have a separation down the way. Maybe it'll be temporary, maybe it'll be permanent, but let's start off together.
And what brings you here to Orange County?
Ben Gilman. When you think about, why are you taking 6 hours out of your life? Because he's such a good guy. And that's why all the people are coming tonight, because he does such an outstanding job for his district. And as the ranking Republican now on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, he's sort of our spokesperson on the House for foreign policy. And foreign policy may not be important to some people, but it really is important to the country, and Ben gets involved in all the big issues.
Gas prices just
Went up, yeah, I understand a lot of unhappy people around, but it's better than they would have had. I think, there's always, you can say, well, it's better than we would have had with the BTU tax. It's gone up a lot more, maybe 8-9 cents. So I know it's not pleasant, but in some parts of the country, it's not being felt much because gas prices have dropped because of oversupply. I guess here that hasn't happened. People do notice 4.3 cents. But again, Ben and I didn't vote for it, but we hope the people can handle it.
What are your feelings on NAFTA?
Well, I support it, but it's going to be a close vote in the House. We have, I think on the Senate side, fairly broad support.
Even from the Democrats?
I think so. Senator Mitchell has been very strong for it, and Republicans have furnished most of the votes. And again, that's an issue in all this talk about gridlock early on. We're working on NAFTA with the president, working on health care. A lot of issues. I think gridlock never caught on, but so we hope to get out by Thanksgiving, too. That's the best news we can give the taxpayers.
Save the country.
Get home right after the turkey.
If you had to grade the Clinton administration on domestic policy and foreign policy, if you were giving them a report card, what would it be so far?
Oh, I think they've done fairly well on domestic policy. I don't agree with what they've done, but as far as getting things through Congress, they've done a good job. Foreign policy, Ben's the expert, but I think I'd give an incomplete, because I don't think they've defined their foreign policy. They're trying to. President Clinton addressed the UN on Monday, and Christopher and others have made speeches the last couple of weeks, but as I'm going to say tonight, I think we've got to look out for U.S. interests, because ours may be different than Boutros Ghali and the UN. He's probably a very fine man, but my view is let's look after our interests first. They may not be the same as the United Nations. Somalia is a good example where I think Ben and I sort of in complete agreement we ought to start getting out of there. The quicker the better. You may make a comment on something.
Well, in Somalia, you know, we had a definitive vote very recently, both the Senate and the House.
Gilman,
And we had a substantial vote in both houses to make certain that the President defines where we're going, and by November 15th, the Congress will have an opportunity to vote on whether we stay in or go out, utilizing the War Powers Resolution.
And Congressman, you're still a strong advocate for increased Russian aid to Russia?
I think it's important that we give aid to Russia if we're going to try to keep stability in that part of the world. And I know the senator's been a good supporter of that.
You know, if there are a lot of options, you say, well, why are you going to do it? There aren't that many options. I hope Yeltsin, though, does yield and have his election the same day as parliamentary elections. I think that would do a lot to say something for Yeltsin, because there's some people concerned that he's been a bit arbitrary, and it's sort of like when the communists first took over there. I mean, you know, they abolished the parliament then and everything else, and so we would like to see a little more democracy. At least I would. Though I don't see any alternative to Boris Yeltsin right now. I think on Bosnia, must be very careful before we ship 25,000 Americans over there, because that's going to be hot territory.
Congressman, your views on the recent developments in the Middle East?
Well, we're elated that we saw the culmination of a long, arduous struggle to bring both the Israelis and the Palestinians together. Now we have to try to do whatever we can to be supportive and make certain that it doesn't fall apart and does progress. And we're very pleased this past week to have the Crown Prince of Jordan meet with the Foreign Minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, and make a further step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think some of us didn't think we'd live long enough to see that handshake.
No.
So, but it's still got a long way to go, and I think we need to be supportive.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator, very much.
Thank you, Senator. So very
I was a page on the Republican side back in 1968. I think I remember you from being on the House side.
House side.
Excuse me, gentlemen.
Save it for the Albanian stuff. That's right. Excuse me. I'm talking.
I'm going to get two groups. Good. Now group B.
All right, come in.
Young man from Brooklyn who's doing a lot of good for our party and
No, get around where you can be seen. Don't hide.
Where's Joker?
You want to?
Check.
Some others are up.
Yep, get in and out.
Ready?
Yep.
One more. Is Naska here?
Can you move back?
Is he coming? Already? Have him out. One more. Never get a pop.
No flash on that.
Where's the flag? One more. Oh, you can't see. Okay, here it is. He's got the flag.
Okay.
David, hurry up.
Can you see everybody? Okay, who's this young man?
Let's go.
Right here. Stand right in front of me. He went to Harvard.
Too slow or too fast. And
quite frankly, I didn't go willingly. I was a draftee. For that matter, when I got to Vietnam, I still had pieces of my mother's front porch under my fingernails. But it wasn't all that bad after a period of time. You got kind of used to it, particularly from growing up in this area, particularly the western end of Rockland County and in around here in southern Orange. I know as a kid, in suffering, if you still had all of your teeth by age 16, you were considered a wimp. That's true. In Vietnam, I used to have flashbacks of suffering. How many veterans do we have here? Any Marines? I'll speak slowly. What I said earlier, it truly is an honor to be here, and there's much to go on this evening, but at first we're going to move quickly through the beginning of the program. I will ask the first few speakers who will be up to please be brief so we can get the good senator on, so we can have time with him to share his remarks that I know we're all anxious to hear. So if we could start off the evening, I would like to call up for the invocation Reverend Smith. Reverend Gregory Smith is a minister at the Mount AME Zion Church in White Plains. And judging from the size of him, we are all going to be quiet and listen attentively. Reverend Smith.
You know, Jerry said be brief. The only persons is the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation.
Brief.
Let us pray. I arise today through the strength of heaven, light of the sun, radiance of the moon, splendor of fire, speed of lightning, swiftness of the wind, depth of the sea, stability of the earth, and firmness of the rock. I arise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's might to uphold me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's eye to look before me, God's ear to hear me, God's word to speak for me, God's hand to guide me, God's shield to protect me, God's host to save me from the snares of the devil, from everyone who desires me ill, and afar and near, alone or in a multitude. God with me, God before me, God behind me, God in me, God beneath me, God above me, God on my right and God on my left. God when I lie down, God when I sit down, God when I rise, God in the ear for everyone who thinks of me, God in the mouth of everyone who speaks for me, God in the eye that sees me, God in the ear that hears me. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Smith. Now, if you will all kindly rise, I would like to call former Congressman Joe DioGuardi, who also joins us from across the river, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. All join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Be seated. Just a couple of words the Congressman said I could have to begin with, and we'll have Senator Dole come up. I just wanted to say that Congressman Gilman is a very special person. He has worked for oppressed people everywhere. There are 40 Albanian Americans today here in this room who've come from, some of them from Long Island, to be here because they know what Ben has done. And by the way, what Senator Dole has done, because Senator Dole took 6 senators to Kosovo, where there's really a Warsaw ghetto right now for the Albanian people. And I just wanted to say they're here and will do everything they can to see Congressman Gilman not only elected, but to see a Republican House, because then Congressman Gilman, who's currently the #1 ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, he becomes the chairman of that committee. Wouldn't it be wonderful in 1994 to have the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Ben Gilman? That's what we're going to do. Right, fellas? Okay. And there's something else. Senator Dole. Wouldn't we want to see the senator become the majority leader of the Senate in 1994? Well, he has a good chance. There are many races next year, and they favor the Republicans. So we want to see Senator Dole as majority leader in '94 and perhaps president in 1996. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't that be great? Okay. Let's hear it for Senator Dole. Hey, fellas, let's give an Albanian welcome. Dole, 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 Dole. And Ben, in honor of all you've done for the Albanians, we just set up a new Albanian-American Public Affairs Committee, just like AIPAC. We got to take a lesson from our Jewish brothers and sisters. They've been so successful in Israel. You know, there are 15 million Jews in the world, only 3 million in Israel. Guess what? There are 15 million Albanians in the world, only 3 million in Albania. They have a diaspora. So the first check from the Albanian American Public Affairs Committee for $5,000 is going to you tonight. And the second check is going to Senator Dole on October 13th when we come down to see him. So thank you all for what you're doing.
Thanks, Joe. And now I would like to call a man who, as they say, doesn't need a whole lot of introduction. A number of years ago, when we formed the Vietnam Veterans Organization, I threatened a few of my friends to come to the first meeting so I wouldn't be there by myself. Did a little bit of advertising, and fortunately, we picked up about 60 people on a cold winter's night. One of those people was this man, Congressman Benjamin Gilman.
So good having all of you here, and we welcome you. We're going to have sort of a double divided program because the senator has to get back to Washington, prepare for Meet the Press in the morning. So if you miss a little of his comments tonight, tune in Meet the Press tomorrow morning, and you'll see our good senator on in the early morning. But right after the senator finishes remarks and has to be on his way, then we'll give some of our good friends an opportunity to say a few things, and we'll try to move the program along. We got some great entertainment, and we hope you enjoy it. First of all, I want to introduce my good colleague, the Dean of our Hudson River Valley delegation, Congressman Ham Fish, who's Hamilton has a commitment to speak in northern Westchester and has to dash back across the river. You know, Ham is our ranking member on our Judiciary Committee, which means he's the vice chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and he also keeps an eye on our Hudson Valley problems. We vie for chairmanship, but Ham's our senior member, and Joe DioGuardi used to be a member of that delegation. We hope he'll be back with us. Ham also serves as our co-chairman of our New York State Congressional Delegation and does a lot of important work in all of those endeavors. Ham, thanks for joining us tonight. Before he leaves our area, I want you to meet our Senator Dole's good assistant who's here tonight with him, Nelson Rockefeller Jr. Nelson? And our minority director on our Foreign Affairs Committee, who's been with us many years, Dr. Rich Guerin in the back. I consider it an honor and a privilege to be able to introduce such a distinguished guest as Senator Bob Dole. And what can I possibly say that you don't already know about our distinguished guest? And when you talk about knowing someone, I'm reminded the other day when Senator Holland and I were wandering through a nursing home, and I went up to, Senator Holland went up to one of the elderly ladies in a wheelchair and said, "Do you know who I am?" She looked at him and she shrugged her shoulders. She said, "No, but if you go up to the front desk, they'll tell you who you are." It happens to all of us. Most of you know that the senator is the son of the prairie, having been born and raised on the wide open fields of Kansas, and that he's a dedicated wounded hero of World War II. When I called upon our good MC, Jerry Donnellan, to MC tonight, and I told him, you know, Bob Dole is a wounded veteran of World War II, Jerry said, well, that's just right. I'm a peg leg and he's a one-armed guy. We go together pretty well. The senators had 8 years in the House of Representatives, followed by a quarter century in the Senate. It's been one of the most distinguished legislative careers in American history, and his many significant positions of leadership included duties as chairman of the Republican National Committee in the early 70s. He was thrust into the spotlight as our party's 1976 nominee for the vice presidency, and his role as spokesperson for the Republican Party as our Republican leader took place in the Senate since 1984, and he's been leading the minority in that area ever since. I'm certain that you are probably aware of his massive re-election last year, followed by his universally acknowledged role as leader of the loyal opposition to the Clinton administration, and has done an outstanding job in that endeavor. And you're probably aware, too, of most of these outstanding attributes that I've mentioned. But let me tell you something that you may not be aware of. Throughout my years in the Congress, Senator Bob Dole has always been a good friend, and I still remember warmly when I was running for election on the first time, and I had a call mid-afternoon from Bob Dole, who was in New York, and he said, Ben, I know you're running a tough election. Can you use me for a few hours? And I said, boy, can we ever. And sure enough, Bob Dole came up to the district. We wandered through the supermarkets for a couple hours, and I'll never forget his willingness to pitch in. But that's Bob Dole. That's a warm-hearted leader who never forgets his friends in the Congress. He's the kind of legislator we all admire, and the kind of legislator we rely upon for advice, for leadership, and for his friendship. Bob Dole is a person whose confidence and advice we all share. Bob is a man who we've come to depend upon in the Congress for his leadership. Senator Dole, we're honored to have you with us tonight. Members of our Citizens for Gilman family, I'm pleased to present to you our good friend, a gentleman from Kansas, Senator Bob Dole.
Thank you very much. Well, I really like what Ben was saying. I almost started to believe it there for a while, but I appreciate it very much, and I'm very honored to be here. And let somebody be seated there. Somebody asked me, I guess, in the press conference, why are you here? And I said, well, the same reason everybody else is, because of Ben Gilman. And why do you take 4 or 5 hours out of your day, maybe longer if you drove over from Long Island, or I take 6 hours out of my day, because of Ben Gilman and what he's meant to the 20th District and what he's done for this area and what he's done for people all over America and all over the world. That's why I'm here, and I hope that's why you're here. And as Joe indicated, Joe DioGuardi, if the House is, after every 40 years, you ought to have a change of management. And our good friends on the other side have had it 40 years. We'd like to try it out for 3 or 4 years. If we can't do any better, well, we'll give it back to them. But Ben and them be chairman of the committee, a very powerful committee. At the very time, we got lots of foreign policy disputes all over the world, and we need some level-headed person, and Ben would do an outstanding job. And so we're kind of looking forward to that. I know this is the Citizens for Gilman. I know there are Democrats in the audience and Republicans in the audience, and there are always 1 or 2 come to the wrong meeting. If you're here, we appreciate, your coming too. A lot of people go to the wrong meeting and walk out and say, I didn't understand a thing they were saying, but that won't be true here tonight. My parents were Democrats, so I can qualify as sort of being bipartisan. When I decided to run for office, maybe Jerry had the same experience. If you get shot, people think somehow you're a hero. I wasn't a hero, I just in the wrong place, the wrong time, as the MC was. But both parties thought I'd make a great candidate for the state legislature. My parents were Democrats, but they weren't, they voted. They didn't do anything else. And I remember the Democratic chairman came by my home to see me, and the Republican chairman came by my home to see me. And I said, well, let me think about it. I didn't think about politics, never thought about politics, never knew what you'd even do if you got into politics. So first thing I did was go down to Russell County Courthouse in Russell, Kansas, and see how many Democrats there were and how many Republicans there were. So after careful consideration and adding up the differences, I became a Republican. So you don't have to have a great commitment or have to have it in the family. So, and my wife's a Democrat. She went from Democrat to Independent to Republican. Took her longer, but I must say, as President of the Red Cross, she keeps fairly busy, and I know I'm always supposed to put in a word for the Red Cross. If you got any money left after this event, you know, don't forget the Red Cross. When I left for New York, she left for Boston. There went that light. But to go to some Harvard board meeting. But I know when you stand up to speak, if you're in politics, there's always somebody in the audience. Maybe they don't like you, but there's a lot of people I really don't know. And they got the feeling if this man or woman's in politics, they must be up about ready to ask for our money. Well, if Elizabeth ever comes up here, keep in mind she wants your blood and your money. So it makes Ben and I and others in politics look pretty good. So we're happy. I want to talk just about one or two things. You know, I'm very proud to be an American, and I'm very proud of the role that America plays. We've got a lot of problems. Gas taxes went up today, I guess, or yesterday. I heard a few complaints about that out in the lobby. It could have been worse. It could have been the BTU tax, where it had been 7, 8, 9, or even more cents per gallon. But that's past. That's history. And the next big item on the agenda is health care, which is going to affect everyone in this room. I assume there are physicians in this room, surgeons in this room, maybe nurses in this room, hospital administrators in this room, but we're all going to be patients one time or another. So it's going to affect everyone in this room. And I've said to the President, Mrs. Clinton, as the Republican leader in the Senate, I want to start down the road together on health care. We may not make it all the way. There may be a separation. Maybe it's going to be temporary. Maybe it's going to be permanent. But this is such an important issue that it seems to me that we ought to at least start together to see if we can find some common ground. Maybe we can't, because there are a lot of serious questions you have to ask yourself about the President's plan and I guess any other plan. There are going to be all kinds of plans introduced. It's not going to be voted on for at least a year, maybe a little before that. So keep in mind, we've just started the process. The dialogue had just begun. Mrs. Clinton has been testifying before congressional committees, was before our Finance Committee, which I'm a member on Thursday, did a good job, laid out the Clinton program. Nobody asked very tough questions, but the tough questions will come. They've got to come, because this is a program that's going to affect, as I said, everybody in America. And I'd just like to raise a couple of questions. First, I think the things we agree on, we ought to try, if we can, to cover everybody. But keep in mind, we start off with a very positive way. Whether some people know it or not, or whether some people appreciate it or not, we have the best health care delivery system in the world right now in America. Right here in America, we have the best health care delivery system. And that's the premise we ought to start on. We ought to start in a very positive way. 85% of the people in America are fairly well satisfied with what they have. Now, how do we reach out and cover the other 15%? Maybe it's 20 million, maybe it's 25 million, maybe it's more. A lot of those millions are children from very poor families with no coverage, and a lot are senior citizens with no coverage. And a lot of that 37 million are young people who don't think they're going to get sick. I never thought I would get sick when I was young. Why should you buy health care? Buy a new car, do something important. So a lot of young people don't buy health coverage. So we want to try to reach out and find out a way to do that. But the bottom line is, how are we going to pay for it? And whether or not the American people want to turn over 1/7, that's 14, 15% of our economy, to the government, the federal government, and state governments all across America. And keep in mind that in some of these states, you're going to have the single-payer plan. Maybe you like that. You may have something else, but it's going to be what they call a health care alliance, and you're going to be forced to buy your insurance from that place. Supposed to be competition. Will it work? I don't know. But one thing that people tell me when I go back to my home state of Kansas, don't bring the government into it. We don't want any more government. We don't want any more government. Well, it's going to be big, big government, and it's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be a 7-member board, and they're going to make determinations on what happens. 7 people, presidential appointees confirmed by the Senate, are going to decide somebody's fate, because sooner or later you're not going to be able to buy the coverage you want. And if you haven't read the piece in day before yesterday's Wall Street Journal, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you ought to read it. I never heard of Elizabeth McCoy before, but we've already talked to her on the telephone. We're going to send her our package and have her do an analysis of our package. She says that under the Clinton plan, you're going to have trouble choosing your own doctor, and there are all kinds of problems we haven't addressed yet. And as I said, we need to start asking the tough questions, not just about the president's plan, but about the Republican plan. And there are 3 or 4 Republican plans, there are 3 or 4 Democratic plans. But when all is said and done, we're going to try to work it out. We all agree on simplification. Ask any physician in this room or any other room how much time they spend filling out papers and how much time they spend seeing patients. We all agree that you ought to be able to take it with you. It ought to be portable. You ought to be able to take your insurance with you. We all agree that you shouldn't be kept out because of some pre-existing condition. We all agree that small businesses ought to be able to go together and get a better deal because of the economies of scale with more people, more small businesses going together. In my little state of Kansas, about 89% of the businesses in Kansas employ less than 20 people. We are a small business state. And I'm going to make certain when I vote that I keep my state in mind and what it may do to small businessmen and small businesswomen who are out there creating jobs in the state of Kansas, putting people to work for the right reason. So we have a number of agreements. Open enrollment, limit on pre-existing, all these things Democrats and Republicans agree on. The thing we disagree on is employer mandates. Are we going to force the employer to do something that he may not be able to afford to do, may have to cut back the number of employees, may lose some jobs? And again, I've got to believe there are a lot of small business people in this audience. And you're going to be asking yourself that question. It's not that you don't want to provide the best coverage in the world to your employees. You want to keep your employees. They're good people. They deserve to have coverage. But some case it gets down to a point whether you're going to be able to cover 20 people or have to let 2 or 3 go and cover 17, or not expand your business. So without getting into all the nitty-gritty details, I just suggest that this is a big, big problem. In addition, under the President's plan, we create 3 new entitlements. Big business is going to do very well under that plan. We're going to take all the early retirees under that plan, and the government's going to pay 80% of the premiums. For General Motors and Ford and other big companies, that's probably a good deal. But I'm not certain about anybody else. Then we start a new prescription drug program. Everybody thinks it's a great idea, but who's going to pay for it? It's $80 billion over the next 5 years. We start a new long-term care program. Everybody favors it. $80 billion over the next 5 years. So when we start adding up all the costs, what it's going to cost you, what it's going to cost your children, what it's going to cost your grandchildren, we're going to have to ask some tough questions and get some honest answers. And I don't suggest they haven't been as honest as they can, but let me give you an example. We passed Medicare in 1965, and we were told by 1990 it would cost $8 billion. It cost $78 billion by 1990. When we enacted the end-stage renal disease program, very important program, dialysis, kidney transplants, we were told it cost about $650 million a year. It's now $6.2 billion a year. So when you get an estimate from the federal government, hold on to your wallet because it's going to go up. Not because it's intended, because you never know how people are going to behave once you get a big federal program. Are they going to overuse the system, underuse the system? If they underuse it, the costs go down. If they overuse it, the costs go up. So I just say that, we've got the best system in the world. We've got the best doctors. I've had a lot of health care in my life. I become the prostate pinup boy in Washington, D.C. I can tell you all about the prostate process. I can tell you about the examination, too, if you want to hear about that. But in any event, I'm trying to get men to see their doctors and get their PSA test. We have a Bob Dole screening booth every year at the State Fair. This year we tested 2,600 men. Out of that 2,600, about 100 are going to have cancer and didn't know it. Because like any other cancer, breast cancer, whatever kind of cancer, early detection means you can treat it.
So if you're over 40 and you have cancer in the family, prostate cancer, go see your doctor. If you're over 50, go get that little blood test. Doesn't hurt, doesn't take long, and it might save your life. Now, that's not a commercial. I don't represent urologists or anybody else, but that's from somebody who's had it, and that's how they caught it. And I've been on a soapbox ever since trying to get men. Only about 20% of men will go to the doctor on an annual basis. And I noticed at the state fair when all these men were walking around looking at this, it was a free test too, didn't have to pay for it. Their wives were with them, and the wives would sort of push them into the, but they'd push back, and they'd have to make about 3 rounds before they finally got them into the net. But once they got him into the net and got the test, I think they felt better about it. So we believe very strongly about that. I want to say one thing on foreign policy, because I agree with Ben. I think we did the right thing in Somalia when we launched the humanitarian mission. But somewhere along the line, somebody changed it from humanitarian to nation building. And somewhere along the line, when we said we were going to be relieved, the American troops, it never happened. And somewhere along the line, we got crosswise with the United Nations. I mean, it seemed to me that the United States interests ought to be paramount when we're considering sending young men over there and women. But somewhere along the line, what we thought we were doing did not jive with what Boutros Ghali thought we were doing. And I think he's a very fine person. But I don't think he ought to be deciding what's in the U.S. interest. We ought to decide that in America. It ought to be decided in the Congress and by the President of the United States. And I see the President now suggesting maybe we ought to start coming out of Somalia. That's my position, and that's Ben's position. On Bosnia, I think it's going to be a sad chapter in our history. When the history is written 5, 10, 15, 20 years, when everybody stood by in the Western world, including the United States, after having gone through this 40, 50 years ago and did nothing and watched people, you know, by the millions being slaughtered, it's happening again in Bosnia. And nobody's doing anything. They're passing resolutions, they're saying it shouldn't happen. We say, do it one more time, we're going to get mean. And we never do anything. And what happens after Bosnia? I say to the 40 Albanians who are tonight, where's it going to be? Is it going to be Kosovo next? Where's it going to be next? What does Greater Serbia mean? Is it going to be Albania? Going to be Macedonia? You got, a million Albanians in Macedonia? You got 2 million in Kosovo. So where do you go next? Where does Milosevic go next? But my bottom line is, since we've stood by and done nothing and watched this little country of Bosnia being dismembered, and now we're telling the Bosnians, well, you ought to accept 30% of your country. We'll give 70% away, and we're going to go over there and protect you on the 30%. What we're going to go over there and do is to make certain they stay at 30%, trying to enforce some agreement that the people never wanted. And I think it's a mistake to send 25,000 Americans. It's going to be a hot place to go over there until we're certain we know what we're doing, until Congress, through the American people who elect us, have authorized the use of troops, 25,000 troops, $2 billion a year. We ought to be very careful before we start committing your sons and your grandsons to something in that area, because we've already muffed it, both administrations. The Bush administration started, we kept talking about a unified Yugoslavia when there wasn't any unified Yugoslavia. So I'm happy that Ben is there, and he'll keep an eye on it, and I know he'll do the right thing. And finally, I'll just say this. I'll just say this in closing. I'm very proud to be a Republican. I know others here are proud to be Democrats, and I don't quarrel with that. But which one did you applaud? Oh, good. Had me confused there for a minute, yeah. But we live in a two-party system where it really works. And Ben Gilman gets elected and re-elected with bigger and bigger margin because he works hard. He works hard for his district. He never tells anybody they can't vote for him. Have you? No. I told one editor once, but he wasn't going to vote for me anyway. I figured that was safe. But you never tell anybody they can't vote for you. And if you work hard for your state, you're going to get a lot of support across party lines. Some people don't agree because of philosophy, but most people in congressional districts and U.S. Senate races, you're going to pick up people from both sides. I'll tell you one story, and I'll leave. And I guess you are going to get to eat. We thought about not eating because we make more money for Ben if you don't eat. But we didn't want you to leave unhappy. You might go out and have a write-in campaign for somebody else. So you are going to get to eat. Not much, but a little. When Ronald Reagan was president, the Republicans controlled the Senate for 6 years, and I was chairman of the Finance Committee. And President Reagan called me down one day and he said, Bob, I got a good idea. We ought to have withholding of taxes on interest and dividend income. Said we'll pick up about $3 to $4 billion a year. So a lot of people just don't pay their taxes. Some forget, and some just don't pay taxes on interest and dividend income. So he convinced me it was a good idea, and we did it. And after we passed the bill, all H broke loose because people started thinking about it, and small bankers started thinking about it. I know there are bankers here. And they started sending postcards by the hundreds of thousands, and they all came to me. And they're all very angry at me. And I remember when this thing started going south, somebody at the White House said, oh, that was one of Bob Dole's crazy ideas. You know, they didn't say it was Ronald Reagan's idea, so I learned about that a long time ago. I don't think Ben Gilman's ever gotten a letter like this one, but I'll tell you what it was like. It was filled on both sides of paper. Every space was filled. Mean, nasty letter. It was put in an envelope, sealed, addressed, stamped, and the guy thought of a few more nasty things and just wrote them on the envelope. Now, Ben has never gotten a letter like that. He's not a mean guy like I am, but I didn't think I was a very mean guy either, come to think of it. But I got the letter. What do you do with a letter like that? It was mean. It was obscene. I didn't dare give to anybody an answer. I moved it around on my desk for a few days. I said, maybe I'll stick it in the Congressional Record. Nobody ever reads that. But that would have cost taxpayers money. So I did what another senator had done about 30 years before. I put his letter, this banker from Southeast Canada, put his letter in an envelope, put his name on it, addressed it, and I sent it to him, but I put a little note on the letter, on his letter. And the little note said, some damn fool sent me this letter and signed your name. Now, I haven't heard from him since. That's first. But being in politics, I put him down as undecided. Now that's the key. Ben Gilman, as far as Ben Gilman is concerned, everybody in his district is undecided. If they're not for him, they're undecided. They're not against him. They're undecided. And he's going to get them next time. And that's the way to work. If you really believe that, you're going to be not only a good politician, but you're going to do a lot of good work when you get to Congress. And I would say that also applies to health care. Millions and millions of Americans are undecided. They're undecided. Should we go for a major plan? Should we sort of back off, maybe look at a smaller plan? And I would just say this, just stay tuned. The dialogue has just started. In 6 months, we'll have a better fix on what's going to happen. There may be a whole new plan in 4 or 5 or 6 months, one that we can afford, one without so much government. There can be a lot of changes because Democrats have ideas, Republicans have ideas, and they're not always the same as the White House. So we're going to work together. We're going to do the best we can. And finally, I just thank you for coming. I know it gets, every time you turn around, somebody in politics is asking you for money. We don't normally do it, but this is such an exceptional group, we decided to break tradition. And that's why you're here tonight. That's why Ben's here tonight. That's why I'm here tonight. That's why Ham Fish was here tonight. And we thank you very much for coming. Thank you.